This is Sound and Vision from KEXP. The Icelandic band Sigur Rós made a surprise album release on June 16th. It's called ÁTTA. It means 8 in Icelandic. It's their 8th studio album, and it features 8 tracks heavy with strings. KEXP's Roddy Nikpour immersed himself in the album and brings us this review.
It's been 10 years since Sigur Rós' last studio album. What sets this record apart from their others is that you can hardly call it rock. Many of their previous albums feature more traditional rock elements, drum beats, bass grooves, a mix of ups and downs. For example, on one end of the spectrum, anyone who's seen Sigur Rós perform live knows that the band tends to end their live sets with the song Untitled 8 off the Parentheses album. On the other end of the spectrum, Sigur Rós has produced plenty of more ambient soundscapes too. You can hear orchestral accompaniments throughout their discography, dating back to early albums like Ágætis byrjun in 1999. The iconic album Takk in 2005, Valtari from 2012, the list goes on. ÁTTA is more like that, but this time the strings tell a different kind of story. ÁTTA begins with this dazzling ambience and these vocal samples all swelling together, full of emotion. And this is actually where I cried the most listening to this album, at the very beginning. The dust settles, and arguably the dust isn't ever really stirred up again, except for maybe a brief moment during Nikpour. To me, this song screams Viking saga. It has this mighty, pulsing kick drum carrying weight throughout the entire song. Other than that, there's a noticeable absence of drums, which is both a creative decision, but also a circumstantial one. In 2018, their drummer stepped down due to allegations of sexual assault. The remaining tracks lean heavily into more subtle, gut-wrenching dynamics of the London Contemporary Orchestra they recorded with the band at Abbey Road. Alongside them, Jónsi's signature falsetto. Time and time again, Jónsi's soaring vocals invoke this sense of longing that also feels like home. That is the secret element. That's what reminds the listener, this isn't just any composition. This is new music from the one and only Sigur Rós. Instead of lifting you up, ÁTTA brings you right down to a scorched earth and forces you to look inward. Nothing spells that out better than the album cover, which features a rainbow banner in a meadow being swallowed by violent flames, burning into thick black smoke. There is an obvious pride aspect here. After all, the frontman himself is openly gay, so there's a commentary on the backward momentum of gay rights in the US. This album is also about the climate crisis, the war in Ukraine, the pandemic, pretty much everything that has made life feel heavy over the last several years. You can hear these themes in the music as well as in the lyrics, whether the song is in Icelandic or in the made-up language of Hopelandic. Amid all this despair, ÁTTA finds pockets of peace and hope. Here's what Jónsi told NPR's Bob Boylan in an episode of All Songs Considered.
It is interesting because when we were doing this album, there was this I don't know, maybe it's just in the world we're living now, but it's like this doom and gloom everywhere you scroll on social media, and everything kind of has this apocalyptic feel to it. World is ending, nature is dying, like climate disasters one after the other, and weird extreme weathers. Yeah, wildfires in Canada and a lot of wildfires in LA, war in Ukraine, and all these disasters. And it's just like, yeah, it's definitely something, I don't know, gloomy about this. Not gloomy, but I don't know, something heavy but also hopeful, I guess.
ÁTTA is a triumphant soundscape, because in the face of despair, all we have is hope. ÁTTA offers a space to reflect on this idea of self-destruction and reminds us that it's not inevitable. Outside of Sigur Rós, Jónsi continues to use art to raise awareness of not just the destruction of our planet, but its passive beauty that we take for granted. He curated an exhibit at the Nordic Museum in Seattle called Flod, which explores the crisis through sound and smell. You can learn more about that in an interview Jónsi did with Kevin Cole a few weeks back in our Sound and Vision podcast feed. Back to ÁTTA, Jónsi says the creative flow was easy since he co-wrote it with the band's original bassist and keyboardist. And after all, Sigur Rós has been playing together for the last 28 years. But 28 years is a long time, and Jónsi seems to leave it up in the air as to whether or not the band will keep up the momentum or hang it up soon.
I think when you've been in a band for so long, you're like always asking yourself, is this the last album? Is this last goodbye? Is this the last tour? And so that is always there also, I guess.
Even with that ominous backdrop, Sigur Rós is on tour right now. They're in Europe this summer, and they'll be here in the US in August, including a stop in Seattle. They're playing the Paramount on August 24th, performing alongside the Wordless Orchestra. Then, not long after, ÁTTA will be available on physical formats on September 1st. For KEXP, I'm Roddy Nikpour.
That was Sound and Vision. Please take a moment to subscribe to, rate, and review the Sound and Vision podcast. I say that at the end of every single episode because it matters. It is a very saturated podcast world out there, and just word of mouth, letting other people know that this podcast is worthy of their time helps the algorithms push this podcast forward. Otherwise, it just kind of gets buried. So if you think it's worthy of your time and others, please subscribe to this podcast, rate it, and review it. Those little things go a long way. KEXP is also a publicly funded station, which means the majority of our operating budget comes from listeners. We aren't beholden to corporate overlords to do what we do. It's a really cool funding model. So to help support the show financially, you can do so with a one-time $20 donation at kexp.org/sound. Thanks for your support.